So I've sandblasted the reinforcement underneath the sheet metal, underneath where I cut out. I used my little speed blaster. It's not perfect, but it did get the bulk of the rust off, and then I'm going to use a converter on it. So let's go ahead and get that out and get that brushed on. This is what we're using. It's Pickle X20, and I like this because you can weld right over it without a problem. And another advantage of this is the only rust converter that SPI says to use under their epoxy primer. So it's a good converter to use before you spray the SPI Southern Polyurethane epoxy primer. So let's go ahead and get this brushed on. It just brushes on. Basically, you brush it on, you let it sit a minute, then you wipe the brush over the area, and it doesn't take much. In fact, I put too much in this, but it's alright. You can spray it on also. Make sure I get it good under that other sheet metal layer. Okay, now we're going to let it sit for a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 57, 58, 59, 60. And it says just to go over with the same brush and knock any debris off. And there we go. So we're going to let that dry, and I'll be ready to put some weld-through primer on it. Now you can see what the Pickle X has done as it's drying. It's not dry there and there. See at the bottom it's not quite dry yet, but this top part has dried. Whoops, sorry. Top part has dried out, and converted the rust, killed the rust. So we're going to let it dry. We'll probably paint it tomorrow morning with the weld-through primer. I let the Pickle X dry overnight, and this is what it looks like this morning, next day. And so we're going to go ahead and put some weld-through primer on it. I use this Seymour PBE. Seems to work pretty good for me. Gives me the least amount of issues when I'm welding compared to others I've tried. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll bring you back when we've got it coated. I saved the piece I cut out of the fender to use as a pattern. I cut it pretty straight, pretty square. You can see where the holes were there, and you can see where the corrosion underneath had lifted up the metal, and whoever did this body work had pecked it down and then put filler over it, pecked it down with a welding chipper hammer, slag hammer. But you know, this lasted 30 plus years, so you know, I don't know. But anyway, so I've taken a piece of fresh sheet metal, and this is 40 thousandths thick, and just like I measured this piece to be 40 thousand. And what I did is I don't want too much of a gap, so I moved this template in just not quite the thickness of this metal, and then put a line around it. So I've got a line to cut with, and I'll just barely take that line away. Probably have to do a little grinding and fitting. I'm going to stay away from this very edge here because there's a little corrosion on it. I mean, I could clean that up, but it's easier just to cut it. Then I'll just have to fit it to the fender real well. You know, a little grinding and filing. So let's go ahead and get this cut. For cuts that I want to get really close on, I usually use this saver saw. Here's the finished piece. I've already dressed it up, eased off the rough areas on the edges, and cut this in, and just did a little filing and sanding on it to get it to fit correctly. But I do need to put a bend in it, because I'm afraid if I don't do that, it's not going to look quite right when I put it in, when everything relaxes. Alright, so I put the bend in it, so you can see that when it's held up against this T-square. Actually makes it look like more than it really is. But that pretty much follows the curve of the fender. And I use my homemade rolling machine here. Rolled it up against this support pipe, and just a little bit of tweaking on the sandbag. So we're going to get it fit up, and well, I'm going to paint the back of this, use the Pickle X20 on the back of this, and put some weld-through primer on it, and then we'll go ahead and get it set up and ready to weld. I don't know if I showed you, but here's the area it's going in with the weld-through primer applied to it. What's going to be tough is, you see there's a gap between the inner support piece, this piece, and the outer skin. In fact, when I cut it, I noticed it flattened out right in this area, and I've put a little shim in there, a piece of copper, to get that back out to approximate where it was. And what's going to be tough is to make sure I get it flush here. I don't want to sink it down too far. I mean, I know I can fill that, but I want to use a minimum of filler here. So that's going to be the tough part. But, you know, if you don't challenge yourself, you don't grow. So, alright. So we're going to be doing that in the morning when it's cool and not much sun down at the basement.